Welcome back to Sarang Menon Academy. In this video, we'll be exploring variables and data types in Python. So what are variables? Variables are basically data containers in which we store some values. For example, suppose we have some mangoes and we need to store those mangoes inside a box. So in this example, the box acts as a variable and mangoes are the values. Similarly, in programming, we store some values inside variables. And like the name says, variables, the values inside variables can vary, which means I can change the values inside variables. For example, if I have stored the number 5 inside a variable called x, and in the next line, I can change the value of the variable x from 5 to 7. And if I print the variable x, the value would be shown as 7 instead of 5. Now let's go to VS Code and let's create a new file. Let's name it as variables.py. And in order to create a variable in Python, we simply write the variable name followed by an equal to and then the value. For example, if I want to create a variable x, I'll write x, then I'll put an equal to sign, then I'll write the value. If I want to store the value number 1, I'll write 1. And then if I want to print the value inside x, which is 1, I'll write print. And then inside parentheses, I'll write x. And if I run the code, it will show 1. Now similarly, if I want to create another variable called y, and inside it I'll store the value 3. And if I print y, it will print 1 and 3. As you can see, this is how we store some values inside variables and print them in Python. Now, apart from numbers, I can also store words also in variables or even letters. Let's suppose if I want to store any particular country as a variable in Python, I can create a variable called country and inside it I can write India. Inside double quotations I have to write India. And then if I print country, it will print India. Now if I print, as you can see, I'm getting 1, 3 and India. Now in a similar way, I can create a variable which stores decimal values. If I create a variable called decimal and then inside I store 1.5 and then if I print decimal, it will print 1.5. As you can see, it prints 1.5. Now we have discussed about variables. Now what are data types? Now coming back to our previous example which I took of the example of mangoes. Now mangoes are a fruit. Now if I give you carrot, which is a vegetable, you will store the carrot in another box. You will not store both mangoes and carrots in a single box. And if you visit a supermarket, you would find various sections such as fruits and vegetables, meat, cosmetics, luggage, etc. That means each category has items which falls on that particular category. If I go to the category of fruits and vegetables, I will only find items which are fruits and vegetables. And if I go and visit a category which is for luggage, I will only see products which are luggage. Similarly, data types are the categories inside Python or any other programming language. Now, now there are many data types in Python, but primarily There are four data types in Python which are most important and which we use 90% of time. We only use those four data types. Now, which are those four data types? Those four data types are integer, float, string, and boolean. Now, integers are the numbers which contain whole numbers, natural numbers, and zero. For example, both the values inside x and y are integer. Now, if I want to create another variable called z, and if I store a number called -1, and if I print z, and if I run the code, as you can see, it prints -1 because -1 is an integer. Now, in the similar way, if I want to store decimal numbers, because as you know, decimals are not included inside integers. So if I want to store decimal numbers in Python, we have another data type called float. Now, float is the data type that is used to store decimal numbers. Now, I have created a variable called country and I have stored the value India. Now, India is neither an integer nor a decimal number. Now India is a word. Now, in order to store any letter or word in Python, there's a data type called string. So, string is a data type that stores a string of characters. Now, the fourth data type is Boolean. Now, in Boolean, there are only two values. Now, which are those two values? Those two values are true and false. Now, you might be wondering why would we use Boolean value? Because true and false. We use Boolean values for checking conditions. Now, in later part of this playlist, I'll walk you through the concept of conditional statements, wherein we will use Boolean a lot because true and false are the most important values when writing conditional statements. Now, whenever we write a value which is a Boolean value, which are true and false, we write it as the first letter of the word as capital. If I create a variable called Boolean value, and then if I want to store the value true, I will write true like this. I can't write true as small t or everything in caps. It will not work. Similar way, for false, I have to write it as false with F capital. Was Boolean false equal to false. Now there are some naming conventions in Python for naming a variable. Now what are those naming conventions? Those naming conventions are that we can't start a variable with any special character or numbers. But there's an exception for special characters. We can only name a variable starting with underscore. That is the only exception while naming while naming the variable the start character for a special character. The only exception that is present is underscore. We can start a variable in Python with underscore. For example, if I create a variable called, let's say, underscore example, and if I store a value called 2, and then if I print underscore example, and if I run my code, as you can see, it prints 2. Whereas if I try to create a variable with, let's take percentage value, as you can see, as soon as I write percentage, a red line appears on my IDE. Now this red line indicates that there is an error. But if I replace this percentage with underscore, the red line is gone. Now this indicates that we can use an underscore in the start of the variable, but we can't use any other special characters. Similarly, we can't start a variable in Python with numbers. We can start with alphabets and underscores. But of course, we can include numbers at in the middle or at the end in a variable. For example, if I want to create a variable called example1 is equal to 3, and if I print example1 and run the code, it prints 3. Whereas if I try to create a variable with one example, as you can see, instantly it throws an error. So we can include numbers but not at the start. Now, in variables, we can perform arithmetic operations. Now, there are many arithmetic operations, but in this video, I'm going to cover only the 4 fundamental arithmetic operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, how to add two variables, how to subtract two variables, how to multiply two variables, and how to divide two variables. Not only two, we can multiply infinite number of variables. We can perform arithmetic operations on infinite number of variables. Now, let's take an example. I have already created two variables, x and y. Now, if I want to add them, that means 1 plus 3. I should get the answer as 4. Now, how do I add two variables? In order to add two variables, there are two methods. The first method is to directly type print x plus y and then run the code. As you can see, the answer comes as 4. Now the second way is to now the second way is to create another variable and store the values of x plus y inside it. Now, if I create a variable called sum and inside it I'll store x plus y and then I print sum and run the code, it will also print 4. Now, in a similar way, I can perform subtraction, multiplication, division. If I write print x minus y, let's group these statements together for better readability. And then I write difference is equal to x minus y and then print difference and then print x multiplied by y. Then create a variable called product. Then create and print division. Then create another variable called quotient wherein I divide it and then print product and quotient. And then if I run the code, as you can see, all of this works. And this is how you can perform the 4 fundamental arithmetic operations in Python using variables. Now there is another concept which is called comments. Now what are comments? Now comments are those lines in any programming language, not only in Python, in any programming language, comments are those lines which are ignored by the system. Now what that means? It means that whenever we write some comment, the system will completely ignore that comment and will not execute that line. Comments are meant for humans. It is created to ensure better readability for the code. Now, how to create a comment in Python? In order to create a comment in Python, we put a hashtag. We put hash and then whatever I write after hash is a comment. If I write hash, let's say variables, and if I execute the code, it will not print variables nor throw me an error. So you can see no error is being thrown because the system has completely ignored that comment. Now I can put place comment anywhere. I can place comment over here. For example, I can write that these are integers. This is a float. This is a float. This is integer. This is a string. And these are boolean. And then here I can write four fundamental arithmetic operations. So these lines would be completely ignored by the system. This is how you add comments in Python. Now the next part is joining of a string and a variable. Now how do we join a string and a variable? Now as you know, string means a string of characters. So if I want to join a string and a variable, that means right now I have printed these values in the output section as it is. Now this does not look good because I'm finding it difficult to identify this answer is for which part. Is this for addition? Is this for division? Etc. So what if I could add a text and then I could put a hyphen or any separator and then give the value. Then it would be easier to read. So that is known as concatenation. The concatenation means we join two things. Now how do we concatenate two things? I have already printed these four fundamental arithmetic operations. So I'll perform concatenation here itself. I can put a hash and instead the command I'll write performing concatenation. And then I write, I put a string, then I write addition, then I put a separator, then I put a space and then put plus, and then if I ask it is if I write and then if I run the code, it will throw me an error. Now, what is the error that it's been thrown? Can only concatenate str, not int to str. Now, what this means? It's written something is written like can only concatenate str, not int to str. Now, this str means string. Str is the short form for string, and int is the short form for integer. Now, this means Python is telling us that it can only concatenate strings and not an integer to string. Now, this means concatenation means we join two strings. But as you know that x plus y is not a string, it's an integer. X is an integer, y is an integer. Now how do I print and concatenate x plus y? In order to concatenate an integer to a string, we use a method called typecasting. Now what does typecasting means? Typecasting is nothing but conversion of one data type to another. I can convert string to integer, string to float, float to integer, integer to boolean. Like that I can convert one data type to another. That is known as typecasting. Now how do we typecast? Basically before the value we need to specify to which data type do I need to typecast. Now since I want to convert integer to string, I will write str. Str is a short form of in string. And then I put opening and closing brackets. And now if I run the code, as you can see, it has printed addition 4. That means concatenation has worked successfully. Now in a similar way, I can write subtraction, multiplication, and division. And if I run the code, it has printed these four fundamental arithmetic operations. Now we don't need to typecast if we are concatenating two strings. Typecasting is only required when we are converting one data type to another data type. And in concatenation, except for strings, all other data types we need to concatenate. And in order to concatenate them, we need to typecast them from one data type to another data type. Now let's check how to concatenate a string. How to concatenate a string. Now, in order to concatenate a string, let's take print, and then my name is, and see, and if I put plus, and if I put my original name, Sarang Menon, and if I print it, as you can see, it has printed my name is Sarang Menon without any requirement for typecasting, because my name is a string and Sarang Menon is also a string. In a similar manner, we had already created a variable called country. So I'll show you how to concatenate a string variable to a normal string. I can write country and then plus country. Now this, now don't be confused. This country is the string and this is the variable that we had created earlier. This variable. And then if I print, as you can see, it prints country India. Now here, no typecasting is required. Now this is how we perform concatenation between two strings. And that's the end for today's video. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button and share it with your friends and family. Thank you for watching this video.